That's one of the new questions. It actually is an interesting question. Does it mean anything? Does the game designer save the world mean anything?
Like, are you just trying to differentiate yourself? Ooh, I know where we're going. Are we ready? Okay. I'm Dave Vanz from the Orlando Life, here guest hosting the Synapse podcast, and I am sitting here with
Kyle Morrand, CEO of 302 Interactive.
What's the slogan of 302 Interactive?
302, we are turning everyday life into a playful experience.
What does that mean?
Ooh, good question. Good first question. We focus a lot on using game technologies to create playful experiences. We use the technology that games are made in AAA formats and then bring that to environments like healthcare or education or simulation and training, and not only bring the technology but also bring the design practices of engagement, of play, of different micro interactions that create game loops, and use that to solve problems within that area. So we look to go into an environment where someone is every day and make that experience playful.
We were just sharing before we hit record.
Yeah.
Is this all professional speak? Is this all like? Is this just a slogan and a catchphrase to kind of like garnish? Yes, you're involved in gaming technology.
For
yes,
sure.
you're creating these things, but I think we've known each other for a little bit now.
Yeah.
You've always been. We are creating everyday play.
Right.
You know. Break that down on a human level. Why?
Ooh, yeah. And I'll get back to your other question as well. Why everyday play? So I read a book a couple of years ago called Play. It's by Dr. Stuart Brown, and he talks about the opposite of work is not play. The opposite of play is not work. The opposite of play is depression. And I loved that because it encapsulated why people play games, which was really always interesting to me. Of why do we play games? Why is there this billions of dollar industry to play these games online or outside? Or why do we have sports, even basketball and football? And why do we watch people play? Why is play so interesting? And it's because when you're in that state of play, you're not in a state of depression. You can't do them together. And so for us as designers, and for myself as designers, creating a space for someone to play means you're creating a space for someone to not be depressed. And so when you take that context into a work environment that might be mundane, draining, tiresome, and creating a state of depression for somebody, minor or large, and you re-engage that and say, how do we make this experience playful? Not silly, not gimmicky or anything, but allow that person to play through their work. In the same way that when someone sits down in front of a piano and they're able to play, and they get engaged and they get that flow, like if you've ever seen Soul, and they get that flow state of play, that's what we want to create in people's everyday lives at the work of what they do.
The depression part, like, actually, I was like, why depression? So the opposite, if I'm not playing, I'm depressed.
Mm-hmm.
It almost feels like more like escapism, but then escapism from what?
Right.
And I don't know if it's called depression, but it's just the mundane, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that's like a better way to do it, because when you get into work, you have your passion. That would be a fascinating kind of like hole to go down. I'm not sure if this is the right spot to do that. You know,
wherever you want to go.
But it's that escapism, because you got to get stuff done.
Right.
Can you get stuff done playing?
Right. Yes.
Can it become a distraction?
Yes, it can. I'm two terms that I actually try to avoid: gamification and escapism. Because escapism, as its term, is you're escaping and you're avoiding something from what you're supposed to be focused on, or from what your core focus is. And gamification is gamifying, which to me is gimmicky. You're turning it into something, a game, without actually creating play within that experience. And so turning something into a playful experience, taking an example of work and saying, like, you do video podcasts. You can do that and cycle through people and make that a boring thing that you do, or you can understand your internal human aspects of what makes something playful for you, engaging with someone on a personal level, having conversational storytelling, really getting into like that human component with them. That's how you play, and I've seen you do it at the bar and at work. and you allow yourself to have that at work, and so you're playing. Right now, this is your play. And yeah, see, and that makes you joyful, and most people don't have that at their jobs. And that's what we're looking to try to do, is recreate the way that they work so that they have that same feeling of, I'm playing right now. This is how I play, and I'm able to make money. That's great.
So how do you do it without putting it into a box and say everyone plays the same way?
Yeah. You have to really understand the job to be done. That's one important area. So in the work context, the job to be done, understand what work is happening and why that person wants to do that work, and really reconnect that person to why they're doing that in the first place. And there's scenarios where people are doing it just because they have to. You can't solve that problem. But the folks that are a doctor and sign up to be a doctor, re-engaging them on, let's say, the patient-client experience, right? The patient-doctor experience, when you're a doctor during COVID and you're stressed 20 hours a day, working, you've lost that patient empathy. You're losing that touch with the human, but that's what you set out to do as a doctor. That's what you wanted to do in the first place. And so that experience of stressful 20-hour work week or work day is losing the aspects of play. It's becoming mundane for them. They're not able to connect empathetically, not able to do what they wanted to do in the first place. If you can redesign that experience for them, the doctor-patient experience, you can allow the doctor to be able to play with their patient, and they can feel really re-engaged back into their work. That's where we want to take that focus.
Listening to you talk, this is neat because you go deep.
Yeah.
You think about this from a theological standpoint. I mean, you really kind of go in. This is a belief model that has formed who you are.
Yeah.
Do you lose that sometimes? So we go back to the question of all that really cool way of saying, like, we create everyday play.
For
like,
sure.
ooh, I want to know more about that, right? Do you ever catch yourself forgetting to play?
Yeah. This year's a good example. We are a company of 15 right now. At the beginning of the year, we were a team of 9. And so we've added 6 more people to the team. And my job as CEO is to help everybody on my team play. And so I am designing and managing and operating a business to help my team play in what they do best, and then help our clients and customers play and help them do what they do best. And so far, as a small business owner I started this for myself, bootstraps going forward, the sacrifice for me has been, and continues to be, I have to sacrifice my play to build this environment for play for other people, and then I will try to come back to my play. And so that's something I have to be consciously aware of, because I start to lose my own energy. I start to get my own depression. I start to create that environment for myself and even my team, where if we're trying to really help somebody play, sometimes we shift a little bit too far and we start losing our play space as well. And it's been very difficult. It's a difficult thing to design for, especially with not having all the resources that we want and need. But we keep bringing it back. It's why the slogan is for us what it is, of turning every life into a playful experience, because we get re-engaged back to it of, are we doing that? Are we creating a playful experience? And my team calls me out on it, which I appreciate. I tell them all the time, like, let us know. Like, hey, I'm not feeling very playful right now. I'm like, okay, that's an HR problem. Let's sit down and figure that out. Let's figure out how we redesign the work here to help you play, because if you're playing, then you're helping our customers play, and that's the connection that we want to get to. But it is hard to balance, for sure.
I love that you have people that will call you out on it, like kind of like just giving you that accountability to do it. I want to know what brought you to this point. What was it? I'm going to guess you were a gamer.
Sure.
You played games a little bit.
A little bit.
A little bit? Not a lot.
It's an interesting part of the story. But
okay,
yeah,
let's go. Let's go there. Like, what from your journey to starting the company? How old were you when you started 302?
21.
21.
Yeah.
Okay, your journey to 21.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, kudos to you, man.
Thank you.
Your journey to starting it. What were those steps? Like, if you were to break it down, over time, like, what were some of the key points in your journey that led you
Before I started
there?
it?
Yeah.
Interesting. I think the first aspect of it is my mom. So my mom, she, in the early 90s, before I was born, she was in accounting at Miami-Dade, and she did accounting, and one day they came in and they said, hey, we have this thing, it's called a computer. Does anybody want to learn how to figure it out? And my mom said, I will. And so she raised her hand and tried to figure it out. And at that point, she got interested in computing and how computers work. So she bought a computer at home and wanted to learn more about it. Self-taught, no bachelor degree, no nothing, taught herself how computers work, kept learning. When I went to school, she met the IT department at my school, in elementary school, and was able to meet the director there, just talked about her passion for technology. He gave her a chance, love Henry, gave her a chance to join their department. So she got a job in IT, no degree or anything like that, just through her passion for technology. Now I am 7 years old at this time. She's bringing home all this new technology. Like when AOL came out, we had AOL. When all these things came out, we had those things because she just loved the tech. And so I've grown up where most other folks didn't in the 90s doing technology. And so that's always been like a core for me. The fun part of that is because my mom worked at my school, I didn't do any technology at school because she ran all the clubs, she taught the classes, she did all those programs at school, so I avoided all of that stuff. I'm not doing the coding classes with my mom and her friends. Like, I'm not gonna hang out with my mom at school. That's not what I'm gonna do. So I was in drumline. I did music from when I was 9 till I was 18. I played drums, I did melodics, I did orchestra, we did drumline, which was my passion. That was my focus. And I stayed in that creative space for a long period of time. Did a lot of leadership there. And when I went to go to college when I was 18, I said, I have to figure out my career. Let me put the drumsticks down. Let me figure out this tech thing. I'd never coded before. You'd think I would grown up with my mom and all the tech stuff. I didn't code going to college. So I took my first college class learning how to program. Fell in love with it. Fell in love with learning how to communicate to computers and technology. I love it. And then in the first year got extremely bored. Shout out to UCF Engineering. Loved the teachers. Got really bored. No creativity. Everything was business application. It was boring. So I started learning about games at the library and how games worked because I wanted to get something more creative and visual. And when I was 19, I moved into an apartment at UCF at Night Circle, apartment 302. I met two guys, Justin and Justin, who were physics and philosophy majors, and they loved games. They had old school games, they had indie games, they had all kinds of games. And I, as a gamer, I always played games, like me and Bob would play games, but I liked being outside, I liked music, I liked sports, I liked all that stuff. So like games was never like, I wasn't ever like a gamer. I just liked games. I played Call of Duty and my roommates showed me Minecraft and I was like, what's that? It looks blocky, why would I play that? And they introduced me into this world of indie games and the breadth of games. So that intersection of, I had this community now of new friends that played games. I was learning programming and I was looking for ways to be creative. And so when I was 19-ish, 20, I was talking to my friends about indie games and why that was something I didn't know about. Why didn't I know about all these games? And they're like, oh, well, they don't have publishers, there's no business around it, they just do it for passion and fun. I was like, that's cool, but that's a really hard thing to build. That's a highly technical skill. What do they do for work? Oh, they usually work other jobs or work simulation or work at banks or things like that, and then this is what they do for fun. And I was like, well, that sucks. How do you turn that into a business? And so my business brain from my dad, who does car sales and cars operations, wanted to understand that as a problem of how do games from creators become a business? And the only way that I like to learn is by doing, so I started a business. And I was in apartment 302, so I started 302 LLC and just started building. And just starting and talking to people and trying to understand, if I wanted to make a game studio, why would it be so hard? And it was very hard. I did a Kickstarter, didn't make that game because it was really hard to figure out how to coordinate the resources and all these people. But through going through that, I was able to learn about different people's passions of this new technology that was still new at the time, and working with game engines, and then figuring out ways for them to connect the work that they loved, their play, to the real world. And I think that was like the first time I like started thinking about that. Of, you want to do this at work, but you have to go home and do this, or you have to go to work and do something else. How do you connect those two things? And that's just been my thesis that I am still working on. In different areas, people are able to do it, but a lot of folks go home to play and go to work and struggle. And they get in this cycle, and then they come home and they stop playing because they're so tired. And that sucks. So, yeah, that's been my core thesis.
What has been something that you've done? Because when you pursue something, you need some small victories to kind of like let you know you're on the right path. Right?
Yeah.
What are some of the small victories that you've seen that have resulted in something that keeps you like, okay, I know we're going down the right path?
Yeah. Small victories. On a business side, when I first started, it was 2014, and I was working on different projects with different companies in the local Orlando area. And I had this opportunity in 2016-ish to work on a Navy simulation for one of my friends, Stu Armstrong. And it was a Navy simulation with this machine and AR goggles and all this crazy. And I was like, let's do it. Let's dive in and figure it out. And then I worked on that. That was fun. And I talked to other folks about it. And I met this guy, Keith, who's like one of my favorite people. And him and I would talk about the work that we were doing, and had no real relation to anything at the moment until 2018. He came back around and said, hey, remember that project you did where you did like a machine and AR and that was a cool thing? Do you want to come do that again, but for Universal? And I was like, okay, maybe. That sounds cool. And that was a big win for us because we, as a business, got engaged in a massive project and were able to move forward, and all that kind of stemmed back from just being engaged in our community and doing small projects that could turn into bigger projects and turn into bigger projects. And that's really how we've evolved as a company. But when it comes to the play aspect, I think our small wins have really come from the clients that we've worked with, where we're able to see how somebody's trying to solve play for their customers. We end up working with a lot of folks that are building products. For example, we have a customer, Alice, that is working on a nonverbal autism solution, and they're trying to make that experience of a struggle for communication for a young son or daughter to be able to communicate with their parent, and not only make that work, but make it playful and engaging. And we've had good small wins in that, where our client, fortunately, is rarely engaged in that community because his son is nonverbal autistic. That's where he gets this concept from. And he uses it with his son almost every day now. And he's able to play and engage with his son on a deeper level because of it. And so that's really powerful for us to see and know, okay, this design theory is working. How do we scale that now to other applications?
So your studio's here, I'm going to shift gears a little bit here.
Please.
Your studio's here in Orlando. You said you have 15 people?
Yeah.
15 people. You've been able to grow. What is it about Orlando to you that really kind of is an ecosystem that favors innovation, gaming? You know, like, talk about Orlando from that perspective. Like, what do you see happening here?
Yeah. It's a good question. I think in Orlando, the reason I came to Orlando I'm from South Florida, and the reason I came to Orlando, just two big obvious reasons. There's Disney World, which I was inspired by as a kid, of Imagineering and all of these wonderful things that Disney is, and UCF as an engineering program, and its strong dedication to proper engineering and how it's scaled that into simulation and attractions and space and all of these areas. And so I really wanted to learn from a practical stance about engineering and then connect that to a creative stance of what Disney does. And that's like a very common ethos, I think, for a lot of people here in Orlando. We had a meeting the other day with like 40 Meta Center leaders, and they asked a question of who's born and raised in Orlando, and nobody raised their hand. And then we started talking about, well, why did everybody come here? Well, because we have the talent and the engineering, and we have the community that wants to engage in more collaborative and social experiences like you would get at a Disney World. And so that collision, I think, is very ingrained in Orlando, even though we don't really talk about it so actively. And then I think the other side of that is, because we have that collaboration and that community-centered approach. I was talking to a friend of mine a couple of days ago, and I called it like low stakes, that Orlando's like a low stakes place. And he mentioned, he was like, it's like a bouncy house. You can do a backflip here. You can try doing a backflip here, and you can fail. And you just bounce back up and somebody will pick you up and keep going. And then you can try again. And that environment sounds goofy, but it allows you to feel that comfort, but still experience and experiment and engage in a comfortable environment. I think that's important. It sounds backwards to the entrepreneurial journey, that it's supposed to be hard and this grind and terrible and blah, 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 and lose your brain or you fail. But when you create an environment for failure that's comfortable, you get new innovation that probably isn't possible in a high stakes environment. And so that's really what I like about Orlando.
Nice. This is my third Synapse. First one was the inaugural one in Orlando last year, then Tampa, and then this one. And I've seen you at all of them.
Yeah.
What has been a benefit of you participating in this? Because you guys are on the main floor at the one in Tampa, which was awesome to see you guys over there. What has been like a good benefit for you to be here?
Yeah, Synapse, I really appreciate that we've been able to connect so many industries together. So our work, we do gaming technologies, but we do it for everybody else. And so I have to be able to communicate what we do to everybody, and that's what Synapse is focused on, is really being that central connection point of all the different industries and business types, big and small, in one area, in Orlando or in Tampa, and bringing all those different companies together as a community and saying, you're all in the same community, just get to know each other. And that's it. Again, very low stakes. There's no expectation of sales back and forth or all these things. We're not vendors pitching to each other in all this aggressive ways. It's just about coming together to create those relationships, which even from a business perspective is super important for us, because every project we've done has been a relationship first. It's, oh, how can we help you guys? If you need help, we can help you solve that problem. If it takes my team to help you do it, all right, my team costs money, I'm sorry, like, let's figure that out, but we're here to help, and we like showing that that's something that can be beneficial to a business and a community simultaneously. And I think Synapse really represents that well.
As someone who started up at 21, a business, started here in Orlando, what you've learned along the way, what advice would you give people who are considering, and it doesn't matter really what space that they're going into, right? It's process, work ethic, there's a lot of stuff involved. What kind of advice would you give someone who's in Orlando that wants to start a business and they want to do it the right way? What would you say to them?
First thing is start slow. I was fortunate to, when I first started 302, I was still in school full-time and I was working full-time. So I had full-time and 302. And then did work full-time up until 2018, when the business was able to give me a full-time job. And that was a great milestone for us. It took 4 years to get there. And I tell people sometimes, like, 302 really started as a business in 2018, because that's when it had revenues. But for the first 4 years, I was just designing and tinkering and taking my time. I wasn't in a rush, and it allowed me to build what I wanted to build rather than building a business for money. So start slow, take your time. I think that's really an important aspect. And then learn to measure is like another area where I think people get really excited and hyped up of, oh, I'm working with this person, I'm working with this person now, oh, I'm doing this and that or whatever, and you're jumping and jumping to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But if you're not measuring your progress, there's two risks. One, you may not actually be successful on paper with your business in a way that is scalable to the next stage. And if you lose that exciting customer, you might fall short on yourself. And then two, when you're in the weeds on something and it's feeling really down and really bad, if you're measuring your small wins, like you mentioned, and you're measuring the progress, and you look at the progress, you can say, oh, this sucks. But look at all this progress we made this year. And that just feels good. It's a good motivator to keep going. So if you keep good measurements, I tell people the two kind of things that I try to focus on is culture and spreadsheets at 302. Those are like my two things that I'm good at. If culture and spreadsheets are good, then you're good to go. The spreadsheets are really important. It's just, people forget that sometimes, but if you can keep track of it, it fuels your culture in a strong way.
What do you think is like, what do you think Synapse does? Like with what Synapse is doing, like how is that contributing to the innovation economy?
Collisions is the easy answer, so I want to think about it.
I used the word collisions earlier today.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's great, but it's the easy answer because it happens, and in like physics you get collisions and all these things, but if you don't have design for what those collisions are meant to do, then you just get collisions and then you get haphazardness. But Synapse, year over year, and they're very slow and intentional about it, is designing a community for innovation. They are focusing on bringing people together and then curating that and making sure that events like this, that content like this is happening, and they're slowly building and designing a community in Florida that can manage and expand those collisions effectively rather than it just being chaos. Because we've seen that a lot in Orlando and in other areas where we'll have an association and a group that does meetups and Expo of the Year thing. And we'll do that for a while and then it'll fizzle out. Synapse is very mindful of how they're designing those collisions to be effective and then maintaining that, not just at the event, but all year. Today, I've had at least 4 people come up to me and say, hey, Lauren made sure that I come to meet with you because I have this problem. And that means that Lauren, who's crazy busy, is taking the time to know everybody and their problems and then make the right connections. That's design. That takes lots of effort, but that's their focus, and I love that.
Last question. How do you define the Orlando life?
Oh my goodness. I want to define it as playful, but we're not there yet. So we'll get there. When I was starting the business, there's this other side of 302 that I focus on of wellness, and we focus on wellness through play. Orlando is, I call, a city of wellness. It is so focused on either maintaining a sense of wellness in your community, in your home, and your family, or how do we improve wellness in healthcare and education and simulation and government. That is its focus. You get places like Lake Nona and Creative Village that are focused on their area and making that a better place, not a booming economical, profitable space, but just a better, more well community. That's where Orlando focuses on, at the individual level and at the community level. And that's to me, the Orlando life.
Awesome. Right on, man.
Love it.
That's it.
That's it.